After 13 seasons of digging on Oak Island, there is still no treasure to speak of, no chest of gold, no valuable hoard, and there's no arguing with that. But 311 things have come out of that ground. And every single one has been cataloged and graded on a scale of certainty, high, medium, or low. Almost nobody who watches The Curse of Oak Island has ever seen those grades. So I'm going to take you through them, from a lead cross that shrinks the closer you look at it, to 2 pieces of human bone that nobody can explain. 13 seasons of next year. The complaint comes first, because it is entirely fair. The show premiered on the History Channel on the 6th of January, 2014. The 13th season premiered on the 4th of November, 2025, and hundreds of episodes sit between those 2 dates. Every one of those seasons has ended in roughly the same shape. A promising target, and then a delay, and then a cliffhanger that hands the whole thing over to next year. One season, end to end, gives the pattern in miniature. Drilling hits something at depth. An expert calls the numbers encouraging. Then the water comes in, or the weather turns, and the crew stands in a field in October saying they'll be back. 13 of those, in a row. 13 years, and nothing found. That's how it gets put in the comments, over and over, and it's the most repeated thing anybody says about this show. There is no honest way to answer that with a correction. The people saying it are not drive-by cynics either. Most of them have been watching since the first episode, which is a decade of their evenings handed to a hole in the ground in Nova Scotia. And most of them stayed. They came back for another premiere, watched another caisson go into another patch of the same field, and heard another expert call the results encouraging. Nobody keeps doing that unless they want the island to give something up. Being tired of a search is what wanting it looks like after 10 years. Somebody who started watching in January of 2014 has since sat through more premieres and more encouraging preliminary results than most people give to anything outside a job or a marriage. Nothing is a vague word, though, and vagueness would be a dodge. No vault has been opened and no chamber has been entered. Nothing has come up out of that island that a man digging in 1795 or a syndicate digging in 1895 would have looked at and called the thing he came for. 13 seasons on, that hasn't shifted. The treasure question has an answer. And the answer is no. So much for the treasure. The other thing 13 seasons produced is a document, and hardly anybody has read it. And if you want to read it with me, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Turn your notifications on too, so you never miss a new one. Thanks, Fellowship. Let's open that document. Dates you can check. In the Season 13 finale, the team pulled a silver sixpence out of a heap of spoil on Lot 18. William III struck somewhere between 1697 and 1701. Emma Culligan, an archaeometallurgist, read the metal at about 87% silver. Then, a CT scan pulled 3 letters off a face worn nearly smooth. M, V, and S. The tail end of the king's name in Latin. The running catalogue of everything recovered on that island grades that coin high. That catalog runs to 311 entries, 163 artifacts, 40 structures, 36 coins, 22 carved stones, and then the tools, buttons, materials, and samples, and one single document. Every entry gets a date range, and every entry gets a grade sitting beside the range, put there by the people compiling it, rather than dragged out of them. High means a laboratory or a mint produced the number, and medium covers real analysis that came back softer. The interesting grade is low, because a low grade is somebody marking down their own evidence without being asked to. Coins sit at the top of the high tier, and the reason has nothing to do with glamour. A struck coin arrives carrying its own date, punched into the metal at a mint, and nobody can argue that back out of it. That date gives you the earliest year the object could have been dropped. That's a smaller claim than it sounds. It is also close to unbreakable. Carbon works the other way round. It hands back a band of years, and a probability spread across that band, which is genuinely useful, and is not the same as knowing when. The mint hands you a year, and the year is stamped into the object itself. Those are 2 different kinds of certainty, and the catalog grades them accordingly. Season 1 produced the other high-graded coin. Rick Lagina recovered a Spanish 8 maravedis in copper at Mercy Point, near the apex of the swamp, with 1652 stamped on its face. Graded high for the same reason. The sixpence is the better story, though, because of where it had been sitting. That spoil on Lot 18 came out of Robert Dunfield's excavation in 1965.
Oh my gosh. I think that we just found a silver coin.
He shifted an enormous volume of that island, hunting a vault, found nothing he wanted, and left the leavings in a pile. The coin in that pile was already a century and a half old when he moved it. It sat there for another 60 years before anybody looked. Every entry in that top tier came out of an instrument, rather than out of an argument, which raises a fair question about the tier underneath. The cross and the brooch. Gary Drayton was swinging a detector over Smith's Cove when he turned up a small lead cross, and it has been the most discussed object on Oak Island ever since. Exactly the kind of thing his top pocket find phrase was invented for. The catalog puts it at 900 to 1300 at medium confidence. 900 to 1300 is a 4-century window. Nobody keeping that list has ever pretended otherwise. In Season 6, the metal went to Tobias Skowronek at the German Mining Museum in Bochum, who ran LED isotope analysis on it. He matched the LED to medieval mine workings in the Cévennes and the Montagne Noire in southern France. That's a specific, checkable result, and it deserves respect. It also establishes one thing. Lead isotopes tell you which ground the metal came out of. They say nothing about when somebody made the cross, or about how it reached Nova Scotia. No isotope can tell you whose hand it was in. In Season 5, Gary Drayton and Rick Lagina brought a rhodolite garnet brooch out of Lot 8. The catalog dates that 1500 to 1699, medium. Then Charles Luton Brain put the setting under 220 times magnification. He found block twisting in the wire, a technique that went out of use once draw plates arrived around 1340, and a silver setting running up to 73% copper. He called the work European and crude, the product of countryside craftsmanship. Roughly 200 years apart, in the same catalog, about the same object. Neither answer is obviously wrong. Nothing currently available settles it either way. The low tier holds a scrap of parchment out of a drill hole sunk in the 1890s, carrying 2 letters in India ink, either Vi or Wei. 2 letters dated 1500 to 1700 graded low. Beside it, a Roman coin catalogued at 100 BC to 100 AD, also low. Nobody forced those 2 entries down. A skeptic never had to dig them out and hold them up, because whoever keeps that catalog graded them low in the ordinary course of keeping it, in the same list as the entries graded high, visible to anybody who looks. A document that marks its own soft evidence as soft is worth taking seriously about the rest. And then the one everybody gets wrong.
Bone? Found buried 160 feet deep in the money pit?
The 2 bone fragments from roughly 160 feet went for mitochondrial sequencing. Timothy R. Fraser, coordinator of the Forensic Sciences program at St. Mary's University, did the work and wrote to the team in September of 2017, and it aired in Season 5. One fragment came back in haplogroup H, the maternal lineage most common among Europeans. The other one belongs to a different maternal line associated with Middle Eastern ancestry. Separately, Dr. Krista Brosseau's scanning electron work on a fragment identified soft tissue and hair. A haplogroup is a maternal line and nothing else. It isn't a nationality, and it is emphatically not a date. The date on those bones came from carbon, separately, and it landed between 1678 and 1764, colonial. The one stretch of this island's history nobody disputes. So the skeptics get their turn, at full strength. Settlers farmed this island. Salvors worked it, and treasure hunters have crawled over it for 230 years. Ground like that produces colonial coins and colonial buttons, plus a handful of odd things that ended up somewhere odd. None of it needs a treasure to explain it, and that is a fair reading rather than a cheap one. The wood and the bone. Charcoal out of that ground, carbon dates to somewhere between 148 BC and 372 AD. Graded high. Nothing else on Oak Island is dated anywhere near that early with that much confidence. Wooden stakes, 1600 to 1826. Also high. Money pit timber from 102 feet came back with 2 overlapping windows on the same piece of wood. 1655 to 1695 on one run, 1672 to 1780 on the other. 2 results agreeing about the same material is a stronger finding than either one standing on its own. Then the bone. 2 fragments, 2 people, roughly 160 feet down in the money pit, carbon dated between 1678 and 1764. Erosion does not deliver anything to roughly 160 feet. Neither does a plow or a flood. Coconut fiber off the beach at Smith's Cove, carbon dates between 1260 and 1400 on a coastline where coconuts have never grown. Leather came out of the swamp with hobnail holes through it, and no stitching anywhere. European construction, dated 1148 to 1216. Craig Tester said on camera that those samples were going back for extra cleaning and a second run, and no second result has ever been reported. And then the wood at Smith's Cove. The U-shaped timber structure out of that beach carries the only single-year date on Oak Island. Tree rings put it at 1769, not a window. A year. Every other entry in that catalog is a span of time with a probability draped over it, and some of those spans run 4 centuries wide. That timber is fixed to a single 12-month stretch. The date belongs to a structure as well, rather than to something somebody dropped. Somebody losing a coin tells you a person passed through. Somebody framing timber tells you a crew stayed, brought tools, and worked to a plan. None of that tier is famous either. No episode has ever been built around a charcoal layer, and nobody has cut a promo over a wooden stake. Nothing on the list is glamorous. There's no gold on it at all. Every item on it is wood, bone, fiber, or leather, and every one of them was dated by somebody in a laboratory with no stake in the outcome. They carry the highest grades on the island and no reputation whatsoever. The unglamorous material is the material that held. People who watch this show already have a phrase for that list, and it beats anything an outsider would come up with. Artifacts that shouldn't be there. What was left behind? Somebody felled that timber and framed it into a structure on a beach. Somebody put 2 bodies roughly 160 feet under the money pit. Not one entry in that catalog shows anything being placed in that ground for somebody else to find later. Occupation and deposit are 2 different claims. The catalog keeps them apart cleanly, whatever the promos have said across 13 seasons. The difference matters because 230 years of digging on that island has been aimed squarely at the second claim, and everything the ground has actually handed back belongs to the first. 13 seasons then. No treasure, and that verdict stands exactly where the comments left it. 311 catalogued finds also stand. A structure dated to a single year. Human remains roughly 160 feet underground. Tropical fiber on a Nova Scotian beach, and charcoal older than the Common Era. The same comment sections have a line for what that adds up to. The story is the treasure. Nobody arrived at that as a compromise. They arrived at it after 13 seasons of watching the ground hand over everything except the one thing it was supposed to be hiding. That isn't a consolation prize, and it isn't a way of letting anybody off. It's the only claim anything in that catalog actually supports, and it's the more interesting of the 2 by a distance. Think about which version of this island is stranger. Gold at the bottom of a pit is a story anybody can finish in one sentence. Somebody rich buried something, and somebody else dug it up. Timber framed on a beach in 1769, with 2 bodies under the money pit and tropical fiber lying in the sand, is a place nobody can explain at all. The second one is a much harder problem, and it's the one the ground hands you. One more problem sits in that catalog. Those dates do not assemble into a single story. Some of them land in the medieval centuries, and the rest land in the colonial ones, and the ground between the 2 is close to empty. Coconut fiber in the sand at Smith's Cove runs as late as 1400. The bone from the money pit starts at 1678. Nothing in that catalog is dated in the 2.5 centuries between them. On an island that produced material on both sides of the gap. Nobody has explained the silence. There's a whole video on that silence, and on why some read those 2 clusters as 2 arrivals centuries apart. Click the link on your screen to watch that one next, and the whole character playlist is linked below for the people who keep going back.